Hi there, my name's Don Simon. I'm Annie Simon's husband, and in this series of videos that we're shooting here, we'd like to share with you a little bit of fun, a hobby of mine that I've gotten back into, and that Annie has helped me very much get back into this. Now, all this got started during the lead up to Christmas, which typically the questions are, Don, what do you want for Christmas? Well, I don't want any more ties. I don't want another sweater. I don't want any more of the usual stuff. I really want something a little different. And I had been wanting for quite some time to get back into my model building hobby. So I said to Annie, you know what, why don't you just get me a plastic model airplane? I haven't built one of those in about 20 years. That'd be something that'd be really fun to do. Well, as you might imagine, Annie, of course, went all out and did a wonderful job. And so here's what she got me. She got me, first off, this magnificent kit here. This is by a company called Airfix, which is a British model outfit. This actually has 4 airplanes in it, all from the Battle of Britain time frame, which is late summer to early fall of 1940. Tremendous aerial battle fought over Great Britain as the German Luftwaffe attempted to pave the way for an invasion of England.
Downed over Kent.
And the Royal Air Force Fighter Command was basically all that stood between them and a successful invasion. And they managed to hold off the Luftwaffe, and the whole time frame is known as the Battle of Britain. Anyway, this kit, or this set here, contains 4 aircraft in it. On the German side, there's the Messerschmitt Bf 109E, which was their single-seat fighter. There's also inside this kit the Heinkel 111, which was their most numerous twin-engine bomber that took part during that battle. On the British side, we have the Supermarine Spitfire Mark I, which was probably the best British fighter that was available. And then we also have the Hawker Hurricane Mark I, which was, while not quite as good as a Spitfire, was probably twice as numerous as a Spitfire. Now, I remember as a kid building model kits by Revell and Monogram, Hasegawa, and Airfix. And the Airfix kits were okay at that time frame, but you know, the pieces were kind of thick, the fit sometimes wasn't all that great, the detail wasn't all that great. Well, in between that time and now, they have upped their game because the quality of these kits is fantastic. The detail on them, the interior detail, it's really, really good. Moving on, the other kits that I got from the same time frame. Now, neither of these aircraft were particularly successful. Doesn't degrade the bravery of the men who flew them. But on the German side, there is the Dornier 17Z. It was known as the Flying Pencil because of its thin fuselage. This was probably the 3rd most numerous bomber used by the Germans during the Battle of Britain. Also, in this dual set here, there's the Boulton Paul Defiant, which was a beautifully engineered and built airplane. Sadly, it was built to a very flawed idea. And the whole idea was that the entire armament of the aircraft would be carried in this one turret aft of the pilot here, and there was no other forward-facing armament. And it didn't work out too well for the British. There were a couple successes early on, but once the Germans got the measure of this aircraft, they pretty much shot them out of the sky. This one later on went to be used for target towing duties, and then later as prototypes for night fighters. Also from the same time span is this one, which is the Messerschmitt Bf 110. This one's the C variant, and I'm going to build this one as the C2 model. This was the concept of what was called the Zerstörer, or destroyer. The idea being that you had this big airplane that would have a long range, heavy firepower, etc., etc., and that it would go over and just clear the skies of the enemy aircraft and pave the way for the bombers. Well, it didn't quite work out that way. These types of aircraft were initially successful in Poland and over France, but when they met up with Spitfire and Hurricane opposition over the British Isles, they pretty much got massacred, and and so they got withdrawn from operations. Moving over here, this here is the Bristol Blenheim. This particular one is a aircraft that was modified as an attempt to make a night fighter. This type of aircraft started out as a twin-engine light bomber. Sadly was not very successful. When it ran into determined fighter opposition, got shot down in droves, and in fact Annie knew a veteran who flew one of these and got shot down and got put in the hospital for a year and a half. But anyways, after the German bombers started taking their losses during the daylight raids on England, they had to shift to night bombing attempts, and that period of time was known as the Blitz, and the British day fighters couldn't do anything about it. And this was the beginnings of radar being carried on board aircraft. So this was one of the first attempts to marry up radar to an airplane to be able to intercept and shoot down bombers at night. Sadly, this one particular type was not very successful at that, but the lessons learned were used quite a bit by the British in their later night fighter aircraft. So while there's not too many victories that were chalked up to the Blenheim Mark 1F, it certainly was the place where the lessons were learned. The final kit here is not from the 1940 time frame. This is from the 1943 time frame. This is an Avro Lancaster as modified for the Dam Buster raid, which was done by number 617 Squadron in 1943. Very interesting raid, just a story unto itself, and so this will be quite a kit to build. So anyways, these are the kits that Annie got me. I'm really looking forward to building them. Unfortunately, since I haven't built model kits in a long time, I don't think my skills at the moment are quite up to it. Certainly not to do justice to these kits, which are of extremely high quality as I see them. So to that end, I'm going to have to try and do a practice one on a different type. Hi, well, last time I mentioned that I thought I needed to do essentially a starter kit to get my skills back up to speed, and so here's what I chose. This here is a much simpler model. This is by Revell. It's of a Spitfire Mark II, and it's in a scale of 1 to 48. Now for those not familiar, 1 to 48 means that 1 inch on the model represents 48 inches on the real aircraft, or 1 inch represents 4 feet. Or sometimes you hear this called quarter-inch scale, because a quarter of an inch would represent a foot. The previous models, the Airfix kits, were all in 1 to 72 scale, which means 1 inch on the model represents 72 inches or 6 feet. So this is a bit bigger model, not trying to do such tiny detail on it. And it's also a bit simpler model than the Airfix kits are. Here is some of the reference material that we have available in my library to tell me exactly what should be. So this huge book here is a very highly technical reference on just about every variant of the Spitfire, and there were quite a few of them over the years. These are beautiful books that have good contemporary photographs as well as beautiful color photographs of aircraft that are restored and are still flying. Same thing with this book here. The Squadron Signal series, and I think I bought this book back in 1985 for the Spitfire in action. Lots of good material in there, also three view line drawings, and also points out some of the various details of the different variants of it. And finally, this book here on the Battle of Britain itself, which is a really good reference on how the aircraft was employed during that time frame. A little bit of history on the Spitfire itself. Classic aircraft of the Royal Air Force. Was essentially, the design work on it started somewhere around 1936. The main designer of it, Reginald Mitchell, had designed high-speed racing seaplanes, had a lot of experience in that type of area. It was his concept for the elliptical wing and the very smoothly contoured lines of the aircraft. Sadly, Mitchell died of cancer at age 47, I believe, just as the first prototypes were about ready to fly. I don't recall if he ever saw them fly or not, but his name is associated with the aircraft. Obviously, the engineers at Supermarine took over and did a fantastic job from that point on. The very first production variant of the Spitfire went into squadron service in August of 1938. And during that last year before the war started, there was a lot to learn. The Spitfire was one of the first monoplane fighters to go into service with retractable undercarriage. Previous to that, the RAF was flying biplane fighters with fixed undercarriage, so there were a lot of times that pilots forgot to put the wheels down because this was one of the first planes that they had to remember doing that in. The airplane was much higher speed than the biplanes were. This aircraft carried 8 machine guns, whereas some of the early planes carried 2, maybe 4 machine guns. Radio equipment that some of the earlier aircraft didn't have. Lots to learn about the new monoplane fighters. And that was enough just during the last year before the war broke out. After the war broke out, there were some really harsh lessons learned very quickly, some of which was the need for self-sealing on the fuel tanks so that if your fuel tank got punctured, it would minimize the chance of the aircraft catching on fire. It's a nasty thought. Armor plate for behind the pilot's seat so that bullets that came in from behind him would hopefully not go through him. Armored glass on the windscreen so that bullets coming from the front would hopefully be deflected. Various different features that had been carried before the war were found to be not necessary, deleted. Long and the short of it was there were lots and lots and lots of modifications made to the Mark I Spitfire as a result of lessons learned. And the Mark II was basically just accumulate all of those lessons learned, all those modifications made, and incorporate them in the production line. Because prior to that, they were like retrofitted to aircraft that were in the field. So this was basically all the lessons learned with the Mark I incorporated into the first production variant, and it was called the Mark II. And externally, it's nearly identical to the Mark I. About the only thing that aficionados know is the difference, and I don't know if you can see it too well in this painting here. There's a little bulge right here, which showed that it had a different type of starter motor for the engine. And that's about the only thing that will tell you that this is a Mark II versus a Mark I. Now, fortunately, the kit here has been appropriately carries that little bulge right there. So if I wanted to make this into a Mark I, I'd simply file that off and I've got a Mark I, but I'm going to build this guy as the Mark II, that it is. And it comes with decals for 2 separate aircraft you can do the markings for. One is for Wing Commander Douglas Bader. Now, he was quite a famous British fighter pilot and leader, and in fact, the box art shows his aircraft, and because of his rank and status, he was allowed to put his initials on the aircraft. So DB stood for Douglas Bader. Okay. The other...
He lost his legs.
Yes, Douglas Bader had lost his legs in the early 30s in a flying accident. He left the RAF, and when the war cloud started building up, he returned to the RAF and became quite a successful ace, even though he had artificial legs, which was quite a story of personal perseverance.
Didn't he become a prisoner of war at Colditz?
Yes, he was. Later on, he was shot down over Germany and became a POW and was a real thorn in their side for all his various different escape attempts. The other aircraft that this contains the decals for is another aircraft that was just what I'd call a plain Jane squadron airplane. Okay, now typically what the British would have on their aircraft would be, I don't know if you can see it well enough here, Each squadron would be assigned a 2-letter code that would say what squadron that the aircraft was part of. And then the individual aircraft within the squadron would have a single-letter code. So this is, in this painting here, this is SH Squadron. I don't know which numbered squadron that is, but there's certainly one could find that out. And this was airplane V in that squadron. You know, A, B, C, D, whatever. And so this one has markings for number 118 Squadron, whose squadron call sign were the letters NK. All right, and then the individual aircraft was given the letter K, so this is NKK of 118 Squadron. And an interesting thing about this, many of these aircraft were built by what was called public subscription, where people of various different towns, boroughs, counties, etc. would contribute money to have the aircraft built, and then that aircraft for the remainder of its service within the RAF would carry some sort of identification that it was built specifically by the people of a given locality. And this one was built by the borough of Lambeth.
Oh, okay.
So you know where that's at?
Yep.
So people there scraped together the money to buy a Spitfire. This particular one served until 1944 when it was lost in a flying accident. But those things happen, fortunately. So this is the kit that I'm going to use as essentially a warm-up kit to build my skills back up, get back up to speed, so that when I tackle the Airfix kits, they will come out looking hopefully great.
Well, thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing how it comes out.
Thank you.